Hello and welcome to Haverin About, a healthcare technology podcast hosted by father and daughter duo Stuart and Bethany. And today we have a very special guest with us to talk all about getting a job, which I would sing a very famous song about getting a job, but I don't want us to get copyright infringement notices. So I won't, but just imagine it happening right now. So today with us, we have Brian Whitehill, who is the founder and CEO of the AccuSource Group. If you are in healthcare technology and you've ever tried to look for a job, I hope that you have run across Brian and his mighty, mighty team. They are fabulous at what they do and have such good insight into what is happening in our industry. So Brian, thank you so much for joining us today.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. And I was wondering if the song was going to be Take This Job and Shove It by Johnny Paycheck, but we're not allowed to do that. I didn't just say that.
I was going to do the Offspring song that has the na-na.
Why don't you get a job?
Yeah. More old school than you, but back in the day that they used in the early 80s, if you were upset with your boss, you could call in and say, you could tell your boss to take this job and shove it. And then they would play the Johnny Paycheck song. So it was a fun thing.
That is
you got to be old school to know that one.
I kind of resemble that remark, Brian. So I do know that song.
Well, I know it well. Well, thank you guys for having me. I think you're doing a great job here, and I'm excited to be on the show. I'm pleased that you asked me up. So
absolutely. Yeah. Brian, do you maybe want to start by giving our listeners who haven't interacted with you, maybe a little background on who you are, what AccuSource Group is, kind of how you got into this kind of niche world of healthcare technology recruiting?
I opened up AccuSource Group in 2004, and here we are 20 plus years later, still doing the same thing. We build go-to-market teams for health tech companies. So it's primarily software, some device, some professional services, some capital, but it's all the vendors of healthcare. We partner with those companies and help them connect with the movers and shakers in the space and the go-to-market areas.
Yeah. And it's interesting because I'm just as you kind of recount, I think the first time I interacted with you was probably pretty early in AccuSource's history.
Yeah.
Because my memory is that the first conversation I had was whilst I still worked out of the Malvern office in Pennsylvania of eclipses. And that would place that probably in your first couple of years.
Yeah, you were a very popular guy with our firm at one time. You were very popular. And seriously, because you had clout, you had a good reputation, you were leading teams, you were very nice, always took the call, you were very well networked, very popular guy. So when Bethany came along, which was just by chance, and I finally put two and two together, it's like, oh, you're Stuart's daughter? I mean, this is a legacy happening right in front of my face. So yeah, I mean, I'm kind of in between your generation, and it's been a real joy to get to know you both over time.
Awesome. Thank you, sir.
Absolutely. So, having been in the health tech space specifically for, 20, 25 years now, you must have seen a lot of companies and helped a lot of companies kind of through that growth, and probably a few of them have probably busted along the way as well.
Yeah. No, it's been a journey. I mean, look, companies don't hire us because recruiting is easy. It's hard. It's difficult. And everybody wants the best talent. Everybody wants the sharpest and the brightest individuals and the most productive and competitive. And the challenge is that the best and the brightest, they're not usually looking. They're certainly not the people who are answering your ads. So they have to be found. So we do a poach approach, not a post approach. And which basically means we go directly for the people that they're looking for. Everybody wants number one. Everybody wants the best. And the best doesn't usually want you. So you need an in-between guy like us to come in and connect the dots. So we've made a living on that. We've seen most of the companies we work with are software. Most of the time, they're looking for people who can sell in the C-suite and effectively sell enterprise solutions in the C-suite, which is, there's a lot of stakeholders in the buying process. It could be as little as 6 months. It could be as long as 18 months, but it's very complex. There's a lot of moving parts, and it takes smart people sophisticated people who have an understanding of what's going on in the healthcare space, which nobody really can explain it top to bottom. I mean, I've yet to find somebody that really can fully explain healthcare top to bottom, but you have to have a pretty good leg up just to be competitive. And
if you want a quick primer on that, you should watch the Andrew Zhang episode on the abominable creature last week. We did literally blow out to the US economy level and then drilled back into the various components of not only the provider space, but the payer space as well. So that's a great primer for people who are maybe locked in and focused in their little niche, but need to have an understanding of what that bigger picture looks like. Sorry for the plug.
I saw some of the show notes on that too. It was like, hey, the CFO's budget is not really there. And trust me, it's not. The payer sales cycle is long. And trust me that it is. Everybody wants to get involved in the payer side. We do a lot of payer searches. You know, if I had a nickel for every time somebody said, we need somebody that has the C-suite executives network and Rolodex. We need somebody that has successfully penetrated the big national payers, and we need them now and today. Everybody does. Everybody does. So it's one of the most difficult types of searches. And I would say that if you do sell to payers and you have effectively penetrated that market, you probably already know your value and you can call your own shot. It's a good spot to be.
Yeah, absolutely. So I like that you said you take a poach them, not a post them approach.
Yeah.
Because I think, and you know, the job market has ebbed and flowed, I'm sure, over the 25 years that you've been in this particular industry. But I think especially in the last year or two, it's been really difficult. There's been some very big layoffs where people who were very tenured in companies have, you know, been shown the door and told to leave, which is difficult. You know, I think if you're in sales especially, but I think any job, you put a lot of self-value and self-worth on, this is my job, this is my career, my profession. So I see things on LinkedIn all the time of, well, I've applied to hundreds of posts and hundreds of job ads and never heard anything back. And so I'd love to understand, you know, if somebody is out of work right now, or if they are looking to find a new job, I don't know if the just apply to every LinkedIn job that's posted approach really works, but also, you know, what should a salesperson do to make sure that, you know, either that they even get an interview, and then when they get that interview, what should they be doing to prepare?
I get this question a lot, Bethany, and it's
a big one.
It's a big one. My heart goes out to the people who are working to apply and to get in overlooked. And it is frustrating because you feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to. You said to do this, I did that. You said to apply, I did that. You said to push this button, I did that. But I think you have to take a step back and think about the transformation of the whole application process over the years. Now, going back to my first job, my second job, 1996, I'm really dating myself. I had to not only apply to the job, but I had to write out a description of myself and why I fit the quality and caliber of person that they were looking for. I mean, I'm 23 years old at the time. So it's, long story short, they made me work for it. Over time, these tools have come along. You know, I remember when it was monster.com. And all the recruiters in the world thought, oh, God, we're going to be out of business because now they've got these online job post things that's going to connect the dots and we're in trouble. We're at risk. And then, of course, LinkedIn came along and we thought it again. Oh, my God, we're going to be out of business. They're going to be able to connect the dots there. All of these technology tools they've made it easier to apply, but harder to be seen. And I'm a very low friction kind of a guy. I like the easy path for a lot of things, right? I want to be as efficient as possible in whatever I do in life. But when it comes to applying for a job, I think that we need more hurdles. Because now we've got the easy button on LinkedIn. And the problem is for every job, I even say some of the bad jobs have 500, 600, 700 applicants. Suppose you're absolutely qualified for that job. It doesn't matter how good you are, how qualified you are, how perfect you are. If you're one of 700, do you really think the black and white words on your piece of paper is going to stand out so much that these people are going to say, no, this is the guy. This is the one.
And I think
so we've opened up the channel. We've opened up the Komodo too far. And now we have too many people in, and we've become more individual as applicants. That's the problem.
And I think that there's some challenges there with the technologies that are being used on the corporate side of things as well, that because of that huge increase in volume of candidates who are, because as you say, it's so easy. You fill in some forms. And in fact, even when you go to some of the sites, because it's ubiquitously down to about 3 major corporate platforms that are being used on an HR basis. You know, you've got the Workday stuff, you've got the Oracle stuff, and then there's Talio is out there floating around. You look at those as major platforms. Now what's happening is, never mind the hiring manager seeing you and going, oh, I like the look of that. You don't necessarily even get a human being. The ATS systems that are taking your input are basically scoring and ranking you and judging you before a human being ever sees you.
That's
and
right.
having talked to some of those kind of corporate talent search people, they say that they're so overwhelmed juggling multiple requests from multiple managers in multiple divisions that there's no way that they can not use ATS to do that. So it is all too easy, particularly for those of us at my end of the generation, to get screened out. One, because our resumes tend to be big and bulky, and we've got a lot of stuff in them. And so therefore, streamlining that down to the one pager that most of these systems really want, and matching against the criteria that have been built into the algorithm is really hard. So I think that it is very, very difficult in that kind of job search scenario to get noticed. Because of the multiple hurdles, and not ones that you can easily overcome.
Stuart, let me ask you a question. You've hired a lot of people, right? Have you ever, this is a loaded question. The answer is yes. Of course, I know it is. But have you ever interviewed somebody because they look good on paper, but after your interview, you thought, oh my God, this is the absolute wrong candidate?
Yeah, absolutely. Because there are some, if I go back 10 years, it was people would hire a resume writer, a human being, to go through and polish the rock. I was going to use another word, but polish the rock. And the challenge with that is, you're right. They look amazing. They've done a very good job of describing that. And then it's literally, you have to get them in front of you and to be able to go through. Unlike a lot of my colleagues, I was pretty diligent in that if I had 11 candidates, I would at least try to have a conversation on the phone with all 11 of them to try and get a sense of who they were, what they were, and did they match what they were claiming. So yes, the short answer to your question is, yes, multiple times I found candidates whereby I went, either, no, you're not quite a fit because these pieces are missing, or that area of experience is too shallow or not quite appropriate on scale for what we're looking for, or people who flat out lied in their resumes, and very easy to catch them out once you actually, had an eyeball to eyeball or ear to ear, ear to voice type conversation.
Well, and I think what the point that we're making here is that the race becomes who can build the best resume. You're going to get an interview. You might be you might be the wrong candidate, but you got in. And there's a lot of really good people that might not have got the interview better because they had the wrong resume. Look, if you want to find out what's really important, or the way that we go about finding out what's really important to hiring managers, we will ask them, we'll say, for example, you take a sales leader and say, how many sales executives are on your team? And they may say, let's just say they say 10. If you had to fire 9 of them and keep 1 because they're your best, I want you to get that person in your mind. Think of that person. Don't tell me the name. Just think of this person. And I pause. I want them to think about why they love this person so much, or why they would be the most difficult to depart with. And then I'll say, now describe to me what it is. Just describe this person to me. 100% of the time when I do this drill, they start describing behavioral assets. They're resourceful. They work hard. They're smart. They figure it out. They're a grinder. They don't need to be their hands held. They are creative in deals. It goes on and on and on. Now, all of these things that they're describing that they value, how do you effectively articulate that on a resume? So what you really value can't be put on a resume. Yet what we say we're looking for in a job description are these hard assets, things that, years of experience. I'm not saying that that's not important, but what we value and what we hire for are different than what we advertise for. And I think that is a problem in the system too.
Yeah, I think that
Beth.
behavioral side is so huge.
Yeah.
Because there's been plenty of people where I've been a salesperson and, new year, new blood comes in and you get the name. And so everybody goes on LinkedIn. It's like, oh, where did they used to work?
Yeah.
And, sometimes you might see some red flags like, well, they've been at 5 different companies for less than a year for the past 5 years. Interesting choice. Oh, they were at that company. You might make some comments. But then the biggest test is when they come in for that sales kickoff and you meet them for the first time. If they're just a jerk, and I've had this happen in my career, where you get the new salespeople come in and they're just not nice people, and you're like, why did they hire them? Like, what did they say in that interview to make the hiring manager think that they were a good choice?
Yeah.
Right. So that's interesting because that's always what flags in my brain. Sometimes it's not the fact that you had less than 1 year stints at places. It's not the fact that you worked at some interesting companies or whatever. It's really, are you getting in and getting your hands dirty and learning and eager to help and creative and flexible, or are you?
Well, and Bethany, I think that we need to train leaders that are hiring that they think I need somebody from a competitive environment. So they think, well, if they come from a competitor, they know where the bodies are buried. They know where all the names, they've got the Rolodex. They're going to give me huge advantages. But what they value and what they say they want are two different things. And they end up making a lot of mistakes trying to hire from the competitor. I don't mind bringing somebody from a competitor. And inevitably, that's a lot of what we do. But I feel like we need to train these hiring managers on how do you drill down and quantify what you really care about.
If you're enjoying Haverin About, don't forget to hit that like button. It really helps more people find us.
And of course, subscribe so you don't miss the next bit of blethering. You wouldn't want to do that, would you? Let's talk about sales leaders for a second, because obviously they're broadly, as other than HR, chief HR officers or something like that, they're your real customer as you're looking to try and engage in the marketplace. Yes, candidates need to be handled in a certain way, but your revenue broadly comes from those relationships with the sales leaders. Let's talk about the company's hiring sales leaders first before we talk about how they then interact with you, because I know that they come to you for everything up to and including CEOs of organizations.
Right.
And you mentioned earlier on some of the challenges of hiring leaders who can be leaders. And one of the internal mistakes I often see is promoting the most successful sales rep to be the leader, either because they're ambitious and that's what they want, and there's a fear of losing that talent, or because they think that somehow or other putting that most successful rep will kind of like do a cascade clone of their behaviors, which has always bemused me because that's not how human behavior works, but never mind. I speak more as a behavioral scientist in that respect. But what do you see the mistake that companies make in hiring sales leaders?
Well, I think it's the same mistake that companies make in hiring sales reps. They believe that because you came from a certain company that you have certain assets that are invaluable to our cause. And to me, it comes down to a behavioral quality again. And, do you guys remember the movie Moneyball? Did you ever watch Moneyball? Okay, great movie. Jonas Hill, Brad Pitt. It shined a light in professional baseball that where, baseball was spending a lot of money on the big hitters, the big swingers, the home run hitters. And this was in the early age of analytics, and analytics got involved, and it determined that, hey, there was a better performance indicator than home runs. It was on-base percentage. On-base percentage is not something that anybody pays attention to. So instead of spending all this money on the big home run hitters, we should be spending it more on these on-base percentage. That caused a lot of friction in the show and in real life, because it was a different way of thinking. And I think that same type of scenario has occurred in our business, where, the traditional way of thinking is if you've been with certain companies and have held certain titles and been involved in certain roles, that you are automatically going to be a home run hitter for our team as well. But here's the thing, the chips have changed. Why is one person successful in one company and unsuccessful in the next company? Did all of a sudden overnight this person become unproductive, and did they lose their talent and smarts? No, a lot of things have changed. The culture changed, the leadership changed, the mission has changed, the market conditions have changed. So I think it's a mistake to think that you could just pluck somebody from the next door neighbor and assume, well, they've been successful, therefore it's going to be an automatic. It's the intangible characteristics. It's the it factor. It's the right stuff that we really want from these leaders. And I think we're screening for the wrong thing. We're screening for the titles. We're screening for the headlines, and we're not screening for the guts. And I think we need to be screening for the guts.
I love that. And I think it's so integral. I think, as you were saying, looking at the other factors that were at play, because there are certain years where certain companies are, for whatever reason, just hitting gold. It may be that there's been an influx in money from the government, and so that particular thing that they were selling was very easy to sell because there was money for it, whereas something else that's maybe newer or different, there's not around. Company culture, exactly the same. There's been 2 instances where I've left a job, one even prior to going to club, where I was awarded club and I left. And in interviews it came up where it was like, well, why did you leave? If you had 2 years of hitting your number and going to club, why did you leave? And it's like, well, because the culture changed, new leadership came in, and I saw the red flags and I was like, I'm out of here. I don't want to. Things are about to change here. And I was still just as productive and good a salesperson as I was before. Like, my own skills and talents didn't change, but everything else around did.
Yeah. No, it happens all the time, Bethany. It happens all the time. Companies, they're not seeing it. I'm afraid that they're not seeing it, and I think it's because it's difficult. The hill to climb is steeper and taller, to look for the things that intrinsically make for a proper match. Whether you're talking about a sales leader or an individual performer or a marketing leader or a product person, it doesn't matter. It's not just the paperwork. It's what's on the inside. And I think companies need to do a more psychological review on the things that really matter and find ways to quantify those skills.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, Brian, and this kind of ties into what you've just been going through. One of the things I've observed is that sometimes there's a tendency, particularly if an early stage company into a mid stage company is looking to hire a CRO, there's a tendency for them to go and hire someone from a large corporate because they think we need to scale. So therefore, we need to go and get that. But if that person they're hiring has worked 20 years in a tens of thousands of person company, they've had infrastructure around them for all of that time. Yeah. That is a tens of thousand person company. And so therefore, when they're suddenly dumped into, sub 100 people organization and asked to build a sales organization, they don't necessarily have the skills there. So there's a balance between, the kind of personality of leader that is a spreadsheet jockey and political master, because that's what they've had to do in that scale organization, versus a team builder, versus a player coach versus true executive presence, i.e. they might be very good tactically managing sales teams, but do they have executive presence to be able to sort of match the executives in the target customer base? And I'm curious as to, I'm sure you understand all of that. And as you're coaching and trying to deal with the engagement of an organization that's hired you, that might be VC backed, might have some other equity board members, etc. How successful are you at actually trying to really drive into what do they need right now and matching that versus what they think they need?
Is the question about how I quantify that? Is the question about how?
And do you just like take the brief and go, okay, I'll go and find you 6 of those
Oh,
to
no, no,
to
no,
sort
no.
of assess,
Yeah,
or
I feel you. Yeah, there's a lot
yeah,
of challenging
yeah,
questions that you have to ask. It's like,
yeah,
there's a, we're trained in the art. We're probing constantly, probing. Why do you need that? What's next? What does this look like in 6 months? What happens if this person isn't here? In the absence of scaling to this level that you're talking about, what now happens? So every possible scenario that you could think of, we want to know the potential outcome. There's a lot of very smart founders and early stage company leaders. And there's a lot of very smart mammoth company leaders as well. To think that we're going to get the same success level at both of those areas is unlikely. I mean, we see it in sports too. I mean, there's people that are good at, you could be the A player on a Division II team that would never even hit the playing field on a pro team. And I just feel like you have to understand the intrinsic values of what we're bringing to the table for what goals that we're set to accomplish. What is the goal? Is the goal customer acquisition? Is the goal scale? My good friend Scott Johnson, he's a professional coach for founders and early stage companies. He talks about something called the founder's curse. Founders do a very good job of getting all the blocking and tackling out of the way. They've got a great idea. They're grinders. They work till midnight. But at some point, you get to a level of scale, and the founder now is trying to do every job, and they can't get out of their own way. They actually become their own problem. And it's time to exchange that CEO for a CEO that's ready for that next level of scale. There's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't mean there was something. This guy is a builder. This guy is a scaler. This one is a maintainer. There are different levels of people that support different levels of jobs. So I think it's important to know, where are we going today, tomorrow, 6 months from today, 5 years from today, because a lot of those answers will help guide us to the type of profile that we're looking for. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've seen the same thing happen with acquisitions as well, when larger companies acquire smaller companies and they retain the founder, because obviously they want to hold on to that intellectual capital for as long as they can, but they hold on to them and they promote them into a role inside this now corporate beast. But to your point, they're a builder, they're a creator. And so therefore, that is not their natural home, unless it's what they want. And they can, people are allowed to change and grow and so on and so forth. But typically my experience has been that does not end well. There should be a clean, golden handcuffs for a period of time. And then thanks very much for your service and off on to your next adventure. Just for their benefit as much as for the corporate entity's benefit. So
I think we have to just ask more questions about the goals and objectives. What are we trying to accomplish? What is our time frame? What hurts us? What helps us? There's you talk about, Bethany, you were talking about acquisitions, and there's mergers and acquisitions that are constant in this business. And, this story appears a lot in our line of business, where two companies come together and eventually somebody gets shaken out, or one side of the organization or the other side of the organization. You had 10 people, we have 10 people, we only need 15 people, 5 got to go.
Yeah.
And it just happens over and over and over again. So, it just comes down to objectives. What exactly are we trying to accomplish?
Yeah.
And I have a phrase that I like to say, this goes back to the turnover issue. I know it's tough, and I do have a heart for the people who are getting shaken out, but it's just business. It's just business. We're in the business of business, and you're going to win and you're going to lose. And there is no one career for a lifetime.
Yeah.
The days of working 30 years for one company are long past.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in sales. These are the warriors in our business. Yeah. These are the people that are out there, battle axes, on the front lines, in the trenches, getting dirty. When they win big.
Mm-hmm.
But rest assured, if they're losing, you're going to get cut. And it's a dog-eat-dog world.
And I think you have to be very realistic as a salesperson. If you are not hitting your numbers, or if you're having a lot of friction with leadership for whatever reason, you need to start looking before you get put on a PIP or before you just get shown the door, because it's going to happen. Because like you said, it's business is business. This is maybe a hot take that's just depressing, but they have no loyalty to you.
There's no loyalty.
These companies have zero loyalty.
Mm-hmm.
They have zero interest, because at the end of the day, they've got to make money. And if you're not producing money for them, you're not helping them. And so that sounds very harsh, but I have had peers and colleagues who have been head in the sand, and I'm like, okay, your manager doesn't like you. You're at 30% of your number halfway through the year. Your pipeline is terrible. Like, you've got, like, go look, go see. Brian just posted this thing. One of his guys just posted this. Like, maybe you should apply. Yeah. And it's sad on one hand, but on the other hand, it's realistic. You got to look out for number one.
Amen. I have a saying, and see if you can read this on my coffee cup.
Always be recruiting.
And I could have another coffee cup made that would always be searching. I mean, there is no constant.
Yeah.
You always have to have a toe in the water. It's individuals get frustrated when something bad happens and they get snipped and they didn't see it coming. And my advice is look, you have to stay ready so that you don't need to get ready.
Yep.
Your days, you never know. The company is always going to do what's in their own best interest. Therefore, you always need to do what's in your own best interest.
Yeah. I think that's why
it's just business.
Yeah. I always adopted an attitude, whether it was your company or others, of if a recruiter approached me and said, can I have a call with you to discuss an opportunity? I always took the call, even if I had no interest, even if I knew I was 2 months away from a big commission check or whatever else it might be, because of exactly what you described, having those relationships, having those networks, and reciprocating. So if that opportunity is not for me, let me tell you about 3 people that I know that might be a fit for that. And I don't know if they're looking or not, but help to build the relationship and feed the relationship with those organizations, because one day you're going to need them, and you're going to need to be able to call and say, hey, we haven't talked for a while, but I had your number since the last time we talked. I had your email, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
I think
I helped place half a dozen of my friends this past year. I was just looking through on LinkedIn all my messages the other day, and I was like, I placed 6 people. So Brian, maybe I should just come and work for you. Because apparently
always be hiring. Always be hiring.
There we go. Always be hiring. Because it was, recruiters would come along and be like, we're looking for this. I'm like, well, I don't do this, or I'm not interested at this time, whatever. But I know so-and-so is looking. So I placed 3 different salespeople, 2 people in marketing and 1 in a product management role. And that, at some point, that karma will come around, or maybe that's repayment for karma I've already put out there. Because every single one, I went back through my LinkedIn and looked at my career. Every single one of the jobs that I've held has either been through someone that I've previously worked with saying, hey, Bethany, I'm here now, come work with me, which is lovely. Or it's been through a recruiter, someone reaching out to me, headhunting me and saying, we like the look of you. We think we've got a good fit. So that just goes to prove you've got to be making these connections and these networking. And saying yes to a call, even if you're happy in your role and you're good, someone, if a legitimate recruiter, because there's a lot of shady ones out there, if a legitimate recruiter comes along and wants to talk to you, talk to them.
Here's a message to your job seekers that may be listening to this. Think of the values that go beyond just the fact, maybe it is the magic job of the lifetime. Obviously, that would be valuable. A second value is you have the opportunity to get to know a company that is in your space that you might be unfamiliar with, that would satisfy some level of curiosity. I mean, you've got to keep your head on a swivel out there. Who's doing what? What are they about? What's their value proposition? Are they winning? Are they losing? Aren't you curious? Take the call for that reason. And the third reason is extending your network. You have to be, the most important thing any of us could be doing in the career management area is expanding our network. And, you know, the older I get, I mean, I was told that from an early age, but the older I get, the more it resonates in my life. I go to any meeting, meet any person at any time, be it in the gym, be it in a conference, be it in a, at a fun run or something. You never know who this person is and what they might be able to do for you. So you have to just keep the tentacles out and expand your network. So sure, maybe you get the job of a lifetime, but you're going to learn more about the companies in your space. You're going to extend your network. And like you said, Stuart, you could even refer a friend in there, help your friend out and help the company out for giving their friend. There's so many good reasons. I don't understand not taking the recruiter call. I don't understand not taking the company call. If the company call, take it.
Yeah. Bethany says, if you don't subscribe, I'm not allowed to make any more dad jokes.
Which honestly might be a selling point. But still, subscribe anyway, please. So, Brian, with that said, though, with all the networking's great. I have a belief that the Rolodex is bullshit. Because I've been asked in so many interviews, well, what's your Rolodex like? My response now is my Rolodex is great. I've got a great Rolodex. I've been doing this for 10, 15 years. My dad did it for years. I've got a great Rolodex. Does that mean I'm going to use my Rolodex to sell your stuff? No. Yeah. Because I don't know of, I'm going to say anyone who has a list of 20 plus CMIOs who are just sat there with a little pile of money waiting for Johnny to call to just throw Johnny money because we love Johnny so much and I'll buy anything that Johnny has. I think the Rolodex myth is bullshit. Yeah. Your take?
It's interesting. So I hired 2 people this year within the last year, senior executives, operators coming from the space. Kelly Lauer, she is wonderful. She was 17 years with McKesson. She was a leader with Frisia for a while. She's been there, done that in a lot of spots. And then I've got a guy, Darren Cross. We placed Darren in 2010 with Merge Healthcare, later became IBM. He grew up through the ranks, stayed 7 years there, hired a few people from us. He went to a few other companies, Agfa, Canon, Waystar, all these people in our world. Darren knows everybody. Kelly knows everybody. So I'm going to give you an example of so both of these 2 came to work for us and thought, I'm going to make 1 million deals because I've got this huge Rolodex. So even when they do have a huge Rolodex, but it was more difficult than they thought. They've both been very productive for us in other ways, but it wasn't in the way they thought they were going to be. So even when you have the Rolodex, it doesn't automatically mean timing is right, culture is right. There's so many moving factors. And so each of them over the course of a year brought in 1 from the friend network. I think they each thought they were going to bring 30 from the friend. So there's the inverse of what you're talking about. Somebody that thought they had the Rolodex, that it didn't work that way. And to think that these buyers, CMIOs, CEOs, CFOs are such good friends with you that I'm buying whatever you're selling. I think we got to get back to what is the real thing that we're looking for. Is it the Rolodex or is it their effectiveness in being able to get a locked in meeting and their effectiveness in being able to pitch a compelling message with a good ROI and work a complicated process with multiple stakeholders. That's what we care about. Doesn't matter how big your Rolodex is. It matters how effectively you use it.
the challenge I see is a lot of the things that I've been approached in the last 25 years since I moved here to the States is smaller startup companies, and they think they are buying a Rolodex. They think they are buying that easy button door entry into a large corporation. And I honestly don't think it works well. I think you might, to your point, you might get one or two opportunities created out of that. You're not going to get 25. And it's much more about the effectiveness of the individual, because quite often those people had those relationships with those organizations because those organizations and the C-levels who were buying what they were selling at that time.
I think I have a message for your founders and hiring leaders, CROs and hiring leaders too. Just like I had the message for the candidates, I have a very similar message. Instead of focusing on finding people with a Rolodex, why not find smarter, better, more efficient ways of selling the message that you have about how effective your ROI is, about how useful your solution is, about how impactful it is in today's marketplace. Because if I'm the person that has everybody's got a Rolodex to some degree, but if I'm the person that you want, why do I care? Why do I care to bring my resources, my time, my attention to your facility? Why don't you convince me that you have assets that I need to do my job effectively? Why don't we flip the switch a little bit? I think too often we get real, and to your point, there's a lot of startup companies out there. It's like, hey, nobody's ever heard of them. I know you got a great solution. I know it's the greatest thing since sliced bread, but they don't know who you are. Why don't you focus your attention on giving them a reason of why they should bring their career to your playground and they can grow and develop and be effective? What is it that you do that's unique and different than anybody else? Let's spend more time in that area instead of focused on my Rolodex.
Well, we are now days away. I'm going to transition now to a little bit of future casting, because we are days away from the end of 2025, and this episode will go out just before New Year's. And one of the things that is in a lot of people's mind is the 2026. So they're closing, if they're a calendar fiscal, they're closing out their year. They're hopefully enjoying some success. If they're not, they're preparing for sales kickoff and QBRs and all the things that come in the early months of a new year. And they may be contemplating, I wonder what the market's like out there. I wonder what's going on. It's maybe 2 years since they look for a job. It may be 10 years since they look for a job. But what are the things that you're seeing lying ahead for 2026? And what, if anything, is different or changing in the last kind of 12, 18 months and trends that you're seeing?
Well, there's two different types of pitches. There's the nice to have solutions, and then there's the must have solutions. And usually the nice to have solutions are sexy and fun and interesting to talk about, but the utilization is low. And then you have the must-have solutions that are not sexy and fun to talk about, but the utilization is high. So think cybersecurity or cloud storage. I mean, who wants to talk about that? Everybody needs it. It's like electricity. Everybody needs it. It's not fun to talk about, but everybody needs it. So I think you have to make a decision on how much risk you want to take on. You want to take on something that's new and cutting edge and bleeding edge, maybe. I mean, AI is in its infant stage. I mean, we're seeing it used in all of the administrative side. It's doing some coding, it's doing documentation, it's doing some really great things administratively. I don't think that we as an economy, we as a country can allow it to do all the big jobs that we need it to do. Otherwise, there will be a revolt. I mean, we all need jobs, so AI needs to be not super smart. It needs to be a little dumber than optimal smart so that we all still have jobs. So I think, look, the needs are the same. We need to integrate the information like we always have needed. We need ways of treating, getting more effective at moving the patient forward throughout the process, communicating with the patient. Everybody's got some type of a communication tool. And I heard on a podcast the other day, I almost feel like we're over communicating. Hey, did you take your meds? Have you done the adherence? It's time to go to the doctor. And so there's a lot of noise and it's tough to cut through the noise. I think you just have to find something that resonates with you because of what's going on with your personal life. And I don't know about you. I don't want to sell just anything. I mean, if push came to shove and I had to go to work for McDonald's and flip burgers, I would, but I'm not there and I have choices in what I could do. So why don't I start with what I care about, what has affected my family, and what problems have I seen? And how about I focus on that particular area for my job search? I think that's a good start.
Bethany and her brother, when they were little, so really my wife, bought a Father's Day gift for me once, which was a mug. By the way, if you would like your Haverin mug, visit the store. So we got lots of nice merch there, including T-shirts and sweatshirts, and never mind. But they bought a mug that had one of those kind of cartoons on the outside of it. And it was a guy with spectacles and a briefcase on a rowing boat sailing away from some Eskimos. That's not a politically correct term now. Eskimos outside an igloo surrounded by refrigerators. And underneath it said, Ralph, King of Salesmen, which is funny because it's like selling refrigerators to Eskimos. But I always said, I'd love it. It's funny, but I never want to be that. I never want to be trying to sell something that actually people don't need, don't want. I need to have a personal, emotional feeling about the proposition that I'm involved in.
Yeah.
That's why I was so long in clinical software, even back in the days when doctors did not want an electronic medical record back in the 2000s. So I agree with you that connectedness and that desire to be there over and above the money. Yeah, that's great. That's why we're coin operated. We like to be in sales because of that. And despite all of the downsides of it, but I think that passion, that connection with solving problems for people and organizations is very important.
And we get a lot of people asking. I had somebody ask earlier this week, well, how much does it pay? And I just said, look, you're asking the wrong question. First of all, I'm not going to waste your time if it's like a gigantic gap.
Yeah.
Yep.
I'm a professional. So you're asking the wrong question. I think the question you should start with, think of it as a kind of a check down list. If somebody presents you with an opportunity, you should look at the company. You do a top level review. What are they selling? Who are they selling it to? What does the widget, what is the ROI? What problem does it solve? Can I get behind that? Is that useful? And you may think it's useful and I may not think it's useful. So it's probably a good job prospect for you, but not for me. And I think that should really dictate, do I take it to the next step or not? Does it resonate? Let's start there.
When I think that's what elevates you as a professional. Are you I'm just here to make money. I don't care what I'm selling. I could sell fintech or clintech, or I could sell EHRs for humans, EHRs for animals. It doesn't really matter to me. That's fine. But I think that we have been given such a gift by being able to work in healthcare technology, because what we sell, none of us are doctors. Dad used to be a nurse, but is not actively. None of us are nurses. None of us are at the bedside delivering care, right? So we are not directly changing patients' lives. We are not directly making people better. But what's nice about being in this industry is that we can play a tiny part in making a clinician's life easier with the tools that they use, or making sure that they're, to your point about the kind of the unsexy companies, that infrastructure layer. Working at Rhapsody, I had no idea I knew what data interoperability was, but I didn't realize how embedded and entrenched and integral it was until I worked there. And so even there, it's like, I'm responsible for making sure that these companies that I'm selling to are getting their data the right way to the hospitals that they're working with. Because if this data doesn't flow right, patients don't get lab results. Patients don't get, MRIs or x-rays or whatever the case may be. And so it's so exciting that we get to be in an industry where we can make that impact. So
it's good that you recognize, it's good that you found your own way out of, because if you focused on the feature, if you focused on just the data interoperability integration part and you didn't start, I don't know if somebody told you this or you came up with this on your own. It sounds like you came up with it on your own, but you you deducted that if we don't get this right, patients don't get their data the way they need it in a timely fashion. And now you've made it resonate in your own mind. And you can get behind that.
Exactly. And then it makes it a lot easier to sell because you're not just selling a commodity of, well, it's a pipe. It's going to move the data.
Yeah.
I think it's not. It's more.
I think I referenced it in the episode that we talked when I came back from Las Vegas and we talked about health. I actually said that if you are involved in solution sales, i.e. typically software sales, that before you even get a quota, you should have tattooed on your shoulder, benefits, not features.
Yeah.
Because it's so critical. So many people I see go, well, our ENR has, and they're reading down the catalog list and you're like, oh my God, shoot me. Just don't do that. You're trying to sell a solution to a problem that a person has that solves a pain that they have.
Right.
And, you got to try and build your proposition in that form. Well, Brian, you've been exceedingly generous with your time today. So it's probably time for us to draw things to a close and let you get back to finding some more of those ace candidates that you're looking for whatever your hot engagement is. And hopefully it's for companies that have got big plans for the new fiscal and going to do exciting things. But let me ask you, what are the 3 golden rules you would ask candidates? Well, let's stick with candidates to consider as they're looking at 2026 and contemplating coming out into the marketplace.
Yeah, it's a great question. And everybody wants to know the secret. But my 3 things would be this. I have an analogy that I like to use. There's the airplane and there's the landing strip. So here's your first 2. Some days you're the airplane. Some days you're the landing strip. Let's start with the landing strip. The airplane doesn't find the landing strip without the lights. And there are days that you need to be the landing strip and you have to have your lights on. You have to be seen from the sky. And what does that mean from a candidate's perspective? Your LinkedIn profile needs to be dressed. You need a current picture. You need to have a good overview about those behavioral characteristics and talents that will not be on your resume. You need to be engaged, whether you're looking for a job or not. You need to be engaged in your industry. Take interest in the people who are talking and have something to say in return. Because the more involved and engaged you are, the more attractive you're going to be to a firm like us. So turn your lights on. Make sure you're being able to see. Some days you're the airplane. Okay. That means you're the seeker. And that means you have to put a plan together. You have to go to your network and proactively outreach and knock on doors. So be willing to do the outreach. And it goes well beyond just applying for jobs. And the third thing I would say is be bold. Rule number 1 of marketing, if you've ever had a marketing class, is to be unique and different. Find ways of standing out in a crowd. And this comes down to solution selling, like you were just talking about, Stuart. At the end of the day, employees are solutions to problems that companies have. So figure out what problem you solve and be bold and creative in ways to convey the solution that you have to offer. It could be done through video. It could be done through posting. It could be done through direct messaging. But one thing that is not unique and different and creative is just hitting the easy button on applying for jobs. If 800 people are doing it, it's not unique.
Absolutely. Bethany, any closing thoughts before I wrap up?
No, I love it, Brian. Thank you so much for joining. You and everyone that I've ever interacted with at your company is just a delight. So we're lucky to have you in our little network, and now
I
our
love you for saying
network.
it. I love you for saying it. I love both of you guys, and I appreciate the interest that you're taking in our world. Not many people want to talk about what's going on the recruiting side. We're just sort of the underbelly of what's going on, and I really appreciate you reaching out and saying, "Hey, let's peel back the layers of what you do, and let's get some exposure in there, give some people some education on it." So, thank you for giving me that opportunity.
Absolutely.
Well, like I said earlier on, if you see the call come through, or you get a recruiter sort of approaching you from a search firm like AccuSource, just listen. I mean, yeah, we're all busy. If you're busy right now, say, hey, can you call me back at? But have the conversation like we discussed earlier on. It's so important that you establish these rapport. And, one, it allows you to represent yourself as a human being to that person. The kids, I suspect that Brian will say, they remember. They remember the people who cut them dead or ignore them or don't pick up. And they remember the ones who have warm, friendly conversations, show a reasonable amount of interest, even if they ultimately say, yeah, that doesn't sound like a fit for me. And if you can really help another colleague, another friend who is looking and does want and is a fit for that, then, that karma is wonderful. If you help other people be able to move forward, I think that's a beautiful thing, and they'll remember. That recruiter will remember, and good fortune will follow you in a karmic way. But with that, Brian, thank you. Oh, thank you very much indeed. And all I say is thank you, thank the audience, and keep Haverin.